Most people believe wealth belongs to the naturally gifted, the well-connected, the Ivy League graduates. But I'm about to show you why that's completely wrong. 3 years ago, I sat in a conference room with 50 millionaires, and I watched something that shattered everything I thought I knew about money. There was a guy on stage, stumbling through his presentation. Bad posture. Worse slides. He could barely string together a coherent sentence. I remember thinking, this guy has no business being here. Then he casually mentioned his monthly revenue. $400,000 per month. I walked out of that room, called my father, and told him I would never trade time for money again. Because if that guy, no smarter than anyone in that room, could pull wealth from thin air, then wealth wasn't reserved for the brilliant. It was reserved for those who understood something everyone else missed. Niccolò Machiavelli figured this out 500 years ago in Renaissance Italy. He watched merchants with no education build empires while scholars with multiple degrees died poor. He saw soldiers with average intelligence conquer territories while geniuses debated philosophy in poverty. And he wrote something that changed how I see everything. Fortune, he said, rewards those who move with purpose, not pedigree, not intelligence, not talent, purpose. And I realized the game I'd been playing, trying to be smarter, trying to learn more, trying to perfect my skills, that was the wrong game entirely. Because here's what nobody tells you. Strategy eats intelligence for breakfast. Every single time. The smartest people I know are often the brokest. You know why? Because they paralyze themselves analyzing every possible risk. They see all the ways something could fail. They calculate probabilities. They build spreadsheets. They research for months. And while they're thinking, someone dumber but bolder is already making money. I've watched this pattern repeat itself hundreds of times. The overly intellectual person sees 1,000 ways a venture could collapse. The strategic person asks one question. Can this destroy me? If not, move. That's it. That's the entire difference between the rich and the poor. The poor think their way into paralysis. The rich act their way into wealth. And I learned this the hard way. When I started my first business, I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't even write properly. My grammar was terrible. My presentations were embarrassing. But I had one advantage. I was too naive to know I should quit. And that naivety, that dumb persistence, that refusal to stop even when I had every reason to, that's what made me rich. Not intelligence, not connections, not talent, just the ability to stay in motion when everyone else stopped. Machiavelli observed something profound about human nature. People judge more by appearances than by substance. And in business, this is everything. You don't need to be the best. You just need to appear consistent, confident, and competent long enough for the world to assume you belong. And once the world assumes you belong, it becomes true. I see this constantly. Someone starts a business. They're terrible at it, but they show up every single day. They post content. They make offers. They serve clients. And 6 months later, people assume they're experts. Not because they became experts, but because consistency created the illusion of expertise. And in the marketplace, perception is currency. So when people ask me, how do I get rich without being smart? I tell them this. You're asking the wrong question. The question isn't how do I get smart enough? The question is, am I willing to stay in motion long enough? Because wealth doesn't accumulate steadily. That's another lie they sold you. Wealth arrives in sudden explosions after long periods of nothing. Most people can't handle the nothing. They need constant feedback. They need validation. They need to see progress every week or they quit. But I learned something building my first company. In the beginning, I wasn't just earning slowly. I was losing money. Every month, I went deeper into the red. My friends thought I was insane. My family was worried. And then, when I was closest to collapse, everything flipped. Revenue went from 0 to 7 million in 6 months. Not because I suddenly got smarter, but because compounding finally caught up. You see, effort in the real world is delayed currency. The work you do today pays you 6 months from now, maybe a year from now. And most people quit right before the compounding kicks in. They plant seeds, water them for 2 months, see nothing growing, and walk away. Meanwhile, someone else plants the same seeds, waters them for 6 months, and becomes a millionaire. Same seeds, same soil, different patience. Machiavelli understood this about power. He wrote that those who control time control outcomes. And in business, the one who can endure silence longer than others wins by default. Because silence eliminates competition. Your competitors will quit. Your doubters will move on. Your critics will forget about you. But if you're still there, still building, still moving, eventually the world has no choice but to pay attention. I watched this happen in my own life. For 2 years, nobody cared what I was doing. I posted content. Crickets. I made offers. Rejection. I built products. Nobody bought. And then, suddenly, everything shifted. Not because I changed, but because I outlasted everyone who started when I did. Discipline is its own elimination tool. You don't need to beat your competition. You just need to not quit. They'll beat themselves. So here's the first truth about wealth that nobody teaches. You don't need to be smart. You need to be durable. Emotionally durable. You need the ability to keep moving when there's no evidence it's working. To keep building when nobody's watching. To keep believing when logic says stop. And if you can develop that, if you can build that kind of relentless forward motion, wealth becomes inevitable. Not because you're brilliant, but because you're the last one standing. Now, let me show you exactly how this works in practice. Because understanding the principle is one thing. Applying it is something completely different. The second shift that changed everything for me was understanding that savings don't make you rich, but they make you dangerous. And there's a massive difference. When I first started making money, everyone told me to invest it. Buy real estate. Buy stocks. Make your money work for you. So I did. I bought a rental property, convinced I'd unlock passive income. Instead, I lost $20,000 and wasted 6 months managing problems I didn't understand. Passive income, I learned, is not passive at all. It's the reward for active competence. You can't skip the hard part. And the hard part is this. First, you master making money. Then you learn how to multiply it. Most people try to jump straight to multiplication without ever learning creation. They buy courses on investing before they know how to sell. They study real estate before they understand business. They chase the fantasy of money working for them before they prove they can work for money. And they stay broke. But here's what savings actually do. They buy you time. And time, in business, is the ultimate weapon. When I paid off my debts and built what I call a break glass in case of failure fund, everything changed. Not because I was suddenly rich, but because I could take risks without desperation. I could invest millions into ventures that would have paralyzed me a year earlier. I could walk away from bad deals because I didn't need any deal. That's power. Real power isn't having money. It's not needing it. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He wrote that the prince who relies entirely on fortune is lost when it changes. Translation: the moment your survival depends on one income stream, one client, one employer, you're not free. You're decorated. You might look successful. You might feel comfortable. But you're one decision away from collapse. So I built multiple streams. Not because I'm greedy, but because I refuse to be controlled. And here's the part most people miss. You don't build multiple streams at once. That's another trap. You build one stream until it's so strong it doesn't need your constant attention. Then you build the second, then the third. Trying to build 5 income streams simultaneously is how you build 0 income streams successfully. Focus is the weapon. Diversification is the result. Now, the third thing that completely changed my trajectory was this realization. Value isn't what you think it is. For years, I thought value meant working hard, showing up early, staying late, grinding. But the market doesn't pay for effort. It pays for results. And more specifically, it pays for pain removed or pleasure delivered. I learned this as a personal trainer. I was hustling, trying everything to get clients. Meanwhile, other trainers had waiting lists. I couldn't figure it out until one of my mentors told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Forget the hustle. Be the best." At first, I thought that was obvious. Of course, you should be good at what you do. But then I realized what he really meant. Excellence generates gravity. When you're truly exceptional at solving a problem, clients orbit around you. You don't chase them. They chase you. So I stopped marketing and started mastering. I entered competitions. I pushed myself harder than any client would. I documented transformations that couldn't be denied. And suddenly, demand overwhelmed me. Not because I begged for attention, but because I became the obvious solution to a painful problem. Machiavelli knew that reputation is more potent than armies. And in the modern world, your reputation is built on visible proof. Not claims, not credentials, results. Once the market sees that you embody the standard, money finds you automatically. But here's the key. The pain you solve must be urgent. I once invested in a company that solved a problem, just not one painful enough for people to pay for. It plateaued and died. The same founder launched a protein bar company that removed multiple pains. Gut issues, bad taste, bloating. That product exploded, not because it did more, but because it removed more suffering. Value is relative to pain. The greater the pain you eliminate, the more wealth flows to you. This is why some businesses make millions while others struggle. It's not about working harder. It's about solving more expensive problems. And here's how you level up. You start by solving small, local problems. Maybe you help individuals lose weight. Then you help gym owners get customers. Then you help business owners build companies they can sell. Each level, the problem becomes harder, and the payoff multiplies exponentially. I went from training individuals to building systems that trained thousands. And my income didn't double. It multiplied by 100, because I wasn't selling hours anymore. I was selling solutions to systemic problems. Machiavelli would say, a prince secures power not by ruling gently, but by removing his rivals. In business, your product doesn't win because it's good. It wins because it makes competitors irrelevant. And your wealth is a direct measure of how completely you do that. So ask yourself right now, what pain am I solving? Who else is solving it? And what would it take to solve it so well that I become the only real option? If that question scares you, good. That's the right question. Because the man who can answer it doesn't just make money. He becomes a category of one. And once you're the category, pricing becomes irrelevant. People don't negotiate with the only solution. They just pay. Now, here's where most people fail even after they figure this out. They solve the right problem, they build the right skills, but they refuse to do the unsexy work that actually compounds. Let me explain what I mean. There's no nobility in staying broke, but there's incredible power in humbling yourself at the start. The man who refuses to do low-status work in the beginning stays poor forever. I remember working as a fitness guide after college. I was escorting out-of-shape tourists on hiking trails. One guy looked at me halfway through and said, "I'm just grateful there are people like you who do this kind of work." He meant it as a compliment, but I could hear the condescension. And in that moment, I smiled. Because I knew something he didn't. I was willing to suffer now, so I could dominate later. The ones who win are rarely the ones with pride. They're the ones who delay pride for power. Machiavelli wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But before you can be feared, you must survive." And survival requires humility at the start. The man who fears discomfort will never command respect. The man who refuses to serve will never be served. There's no shame in starting at the bottom, only in staying there because your ego won't let you climb. And here's the brutal truth. Most people are too proud to be rich. They'd rather look successful than become successful. They'd rather avoid embarrassment than endure the grind that builds empires. But wealth doesn't care about your pride. It only cares about your output. So if you're still working a job you hate because you're too proud to start over, you've already lost. If you're avoiding an opportunity because it doesn't match your self-image, you're choosing ego over empire. And ego is expensive. It costs you everything: tears. Another trap that keeps people stuck. The moment you start counting someone else's money, you disqualify yourself from making your own. I learned this the hard way. There was a deal I walked away from years ago, not because it didn't meet my goals, but because I became obsessed with how much the other party was going to make. A partner whispered in my ear, "He's going to make 500 million and we're doing all the work." I listened, and I lost. That company skyrocketed in value over the next few years, far beyond what anyone projected. And I missed it entirely because I was too busy measuring someone else's plate instead of filling my own. Machiavelli warned, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand." I judged that deal emotionally, not economically. And that mistake cost me generational wealth. The wealthy understand something the poor never grasp. Abundance isn't zero-sum. Someone else getting rich doesn't prevent you from doing the same. In fact, their success often creates opportunities for yours. But when you operate from scarcity, when you see every win as someone else's loss, you close doors before you even know they're open. Envy is a tax on attention, and attention is your only non-renewable resource. Every minute you spend resenting someone's success is a minute you're not building your own. Every hour you waste wondering why they have what you don't is an hour stolen from your future. So here's what I did. I unfollowed everyone who made me feel bitter. I stopped reading about other people's wins. I disconnected from the comparison game entirely, and I returned to my mission. Because focus is currency, and you can't afford to spend it on envy. Now let me destroy another myth that's keeping you broke. The belief that mindset precedes money. That you must feel rich to become rich. That you must believe in yourself before you act. That's not how it works. I didn't believe I could make $1 million. I didn't believe I was capable of earning hundreds of millions. I didn't wake up one day with unshakable confidence and then go build an empire. I simply copied the behavior of someone who had what I wanted. And through action, belief followed. Machiavelli would laugh at the idea of manifesting power without effort. In his world, power is never granted. It's seized through relentless action. I remember reading every book on wealth mindset, trying to rewire my thoughts. I even gave my groceries to homeless people, thinking I was attracting abundance through generosity. Nothing changed. Then I met my first real mentor. I told him what I was doing, and he said something that hit like a hammer. Money doesn't discriminate. It goes to the one who works, not the one who wishes, not the one who visualizes, the one who works. From that day forward, I stopped trying to change my thoughts and started changing my behavior. Because here's the truth they won't tell you. Every action you take is a vote for who you're becoming. And no belief system can override the law of cause and effect. The man who chops wood eventually warms his home. The man who reads about fire freezes. You don't need more affirmations. You don't need more journal prompts. You don't need to align your chakras or manifest your destiny. You need to move. Take the risk you've been avoiding. Solve the problem you've been ignoring. Make the offer you're afraid to make. Start the business you think you're not ready for. Because readiness is a myth. Nobody feels ready. The rich just move anyway. And here's what happens when you do. You start to notice patterns. You see what works and what doesn't. You iterate. You improve. You build competence through repetition. And eventually, the belief catches up. Not because you convinced yourself in a mirror, but because you proved it through results. Confidence isn't a prerequisite for action. It's a byproduct. So stop waiting to feel ready. Start acting like someone who already is. Now, let's talk about the biggest lie they ever sold you about wealth. The idea that success is a straight line, that you set a goal, work toward it consistently, and gradually climb to the top. That's not how it works. Not even close. Wealth doesn't trickle in. It floods. You'll work for months, maybe years, seeing almost nothing. And then suddenly, everything hits at once. Revenue explodes. Opportunities multiply. Doors that were closed start opening automatically. This is what Machiavelli understood about fortune. She's not a gentle stream. She's a violent river. And you have to build the dam before the flood comes. Because when it comes, and it will come if you stay in motion, you need to be ready to capture it. Most people aren't. They finally get there. Breakthrough, and they're so unprepared that it destroys them. They can't handle the volume. They can't scale the systems. They can't manage the pressure. And they collapse right at the moment they were supposed to win. I've seen this dozens of times. Someone grinds for years, finally breaks through, and within 6 months, they're back where they started. Why? Because they never built the infrastructure for success. They were so focused on getting the opportunity that they forgot to prepare for what happens after. So while you're in the silent phase, while nobody's watching and nothing's working, that's when you build. You build systems. You build skills. You build relationships. You build discipline, so that when the dam breaks, you don't drown. You surf. And here's the other thing nobody tells you about wealth. It's lonely at the start. Your friends won't understand why you're working on weekends. Your family will question why you're taking risks. People will mock your ambition because it makes their comfort look like surrender. And you'll have to endure that isolation without validation. Machiavelli knew this. He spent years in exile, writing The Prince while everyone dismissed him. But he understood something most people never learn. The approval of the crowd means nothing. What matters is the respect of history. And history only remembers those who refuse to quit. So if you're in that phase right now, where nobody believes in what you're building, where people think you're crazy for trying, good. That's exactly where you're supposed to be. Because the path to wealth is always walked alone at first. Later, when you've arrived, everyone will act like they knew you'd make it. They'll rewrite history and claim they always believed in you. But you'll remember. You'll remember who was there when there was nothing to gain. And you'll remember who showed up once there was something to take. That's why Machiavelli warned, never show the full extent of your resources. Let people underestimate you, because their doubt is your advantage. While they're dismissing you, you're building. While they're laughing, you're learning. While they're comfortable, you're compounding. And when you finally emerge, you won't announce it. You'll just be undeniable. Now let me tell you about the final shift that separates those who stay rich from those who just get lucky once. It's understanding that wealth isn't about what you earn. It's about what you keep. And more importantly, what you build that keeps earning after you stop working. Most people think the goal is to make a lot of money. But that's not the goal. That's just the beginning. The real goal is to build a system that makes money whether you show up or not. I learned this by watching people who made millions and lost it all within a few years. They had income, but no structure. They could generate cash, but they couldn't build equity. And the moment they stopped working, the money stopped coming. That's not wealth. That's just a high-paying job. Machiavelli wrote about princes who conquered territories but couldn't hold them. They had the strength to seize power, but not the strategy to maintain it. And they lost everything they fought for. Wealth works the same way. Making money is conquest. Keeping money is governance. And most people are great at the first part, but terrible at the second. So here's what I did differently. Every time I made money, I asked myself one question. How do I turn this into a system that works without me? And that question changed everything. Instead of just taking clients, I built a process to train other trainers. Instead of just running one gym, I created a model that other gym owners could replicate. Instead of just building one business, I created frameworks that could be applied across industries. And suddenly, my income wasn't tied to my hours anymore. I was earning from systems I'd built years ago. That's leverage. Real leverage isn't working harder. It's building something once that pays you forever. Now, most people hear this and immediately think they need to create a course or start a coaching program. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this. Every action you take should either make you money now or build an asset that makes you money later. If it does neither, stop doing it. Most people spend their entire lives on activities that do neither. They work jobs that don't build equity. They chase opportunities that don't compound. They stay busy without ever building leverage. And they wonder why, after decades of hard work, they're still struggling. Machiavelli would call this the illusion of effort. You're moving, but you're not progressing. You're active, but you're not effective. And in the game of wealth, effective beats active every single time. So start asking yourself, what am I building that will outlast my effort? What system am I creating that will work while I sleep? What asset am I developing that will appreciate over time? Because here's the truth. Rich people don't work for money. Money works for them. And the only way to make money work for you is to build systems that generate value without requiring your constant presence. This is how generational wealth is created. Not through salary, not through hustle, but through architecture. You build once, and it pays forever. Now, let me address the elephant in the room. Everything I've told you sounds great in theory, but you're probably thinking, this doesn't apply to me. I don't have capital. I don't have connections. I don't have time. And that's exactly the thinking that will keep you poor forever. Because every single person who built wealth started with nothing. The difference is, they didn't let nothing be an excuse. When I started, I had no money. I was in debt. I had no network, no mentor, no blueprint, just a willingness to figure it out. And here's what I learned. You don't need capital to start. You need skill. You don't need connections to grow. You need value. You don't need time to build. You need focus. Capital comes after you prove you can create value. Connections form after you demonstrate competence. Time expands when you eliminate everything that doesn't compound. So stop waiting for perfect conditions. They don't exist. Stop waiting for someone to give you permission. No one will. Stop waiting until you feel ready. You never will. The only thing standing between you and wealth is action. Consistent, strategic, relentless action. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors the bold. Not the reckless, not the stupid, the bold. The ones who see opportunity and move before fear convinces them to wait. And here's the final truth I want to leave you with. Wealth is not reserved for the special. It's available to anyone willing to endure what most people won't. Most people won't sacrifice comfort for sovereignty. Most people won't delay gratification for a decade. Most people won't work in silence while others party. Most people won't risk embarrassment to pursue something uncertain. But you're not most people. If you were, you wouldn't have watched this far. You're someone who's tired of the excuses, tired of the mediocrity, tired of watching other people live the life you know you're capable of building. And that's good, because anger is fuel. Use it. Frustration is direction. Follow it. Impatience is energy. Channel it. But don't let any of those emotions make you reactive. Let them make you strategic. Because the world doesn't reward those who want it most. It rewards those who move most intelligently. So here's what you do next. First, identify one skill you can master that solves an expensive problem. Not a cheap problem. Not a nice-to-have problem. An expensive, painful, urgent problem. Second, build competence in that skill until you're undeniably excellent. Not good. Excellent. Because good is invisible. Excellent is magnetic. Third, document your results. Build proof that you can deliver what you claim. Proof is the only marketing that matters. Fourth, create a system around that skill so you're not forever trading time for money. Build leverage. Fifth, stay in motion for longer than everyone else. Outlast your competition. Survive the silence. And finally, never stop learning. Never stop iterating. Never stop building. Because wealth isn't a destination. It's a direction. And the moment you stop moving, you start dying. Machiavelli spent his final years in exile, broke and forgotten. But his words outlasted empires. Because he understood something that transcends money. Legacy is built by those who refuse to quit. And if you take nothing else from this, take that. You don't need to be the smartest. You don't need to be the most talented. You don't need to be the most connected. You just need to be the last one standing. Because in the end, wealth doesn't go to those who deserve it. It goes to those who endure long enough to claim it. So the only question left is this. Are you willing to endure what most people won't to build what most people can't? If the answer is yes, you already know what to do. Stop watching. Start building. And don't stop until you're undeniable. Because the world doesn't remember those who tried. It remembers those who succeeded. And success isn't about luck. It's about lasting. Now go. Build your empire. And prove to yourself that everything they said you couldn't do was just noise from people who never tried.